Hello everybody, welcome to That's Football. An absolutely massive win for Manchester City in a court case. It's not the 115, but it could have big ramifications. It's interesting, last week we were talking about this ATP ruling, Associated Party Transaction ruling. There was rumours that Man City had won, then there was rumours that they hadn't. Well, apparently they have. It's been breaking in the last hour that they have. It's been announced that Man City's legal case against the Premier League over its associated party transaction rules, they've actually had two aspects of that case deemed unlawful by a tribunal. This can blow the bloody doors off the 115, but it can also blow the doors off football. However, the Premier League are saying the tribunal rejected the majority of Manchester City's challenges and endorsed the overall objectives, framework and decision-making of the APT system. So it's definitely a moving story. There are so many interpretations I've heard in the last 20 minutes, and I think the best way to do it is to start with worst case scenario and best case scenario we'll talk about. The worst case scenario here, in simple terms, is that associated party transactions, as we discussed last week, are things like Man City, Etihad Airways, links, and saying that a sponsorship deal that would normally be worth 60 million will give you 600 million, inflating it because you own the company, etc. Associated party transactions. If that principle falls apart, forget about it. Football's over. Man City fans will claim a victory because it benefits their football club. But if Man City were Arsenal fans, they'd be moaning about it. Because fundamentally, it's not competitive. It's not fair. Arsenal are not owned by massively rich people who have access to other sponsorship deals that can throw into the club at inordinate, at massive levels. It will break the fabric of the Premier League. It would be potentially advantageous for someone like Newcastle, who can't get their money from Saudi Arabia into the club because of FFP and PSR. If this all fell apart, Newcastle could say, visit Saudi, £300 million shirt sponsorship a week or something like that. So it has the basis to dismantle football if it is worst case scenario. If there is, if the result of this win for Man City, whether it's big, significant or small, is that you can now have associated party transactions, free will over your club, then if you are state owned or mega rich, you can just funnel in every sponsorship you deal at whatever price you want. You can have a shirt sponsor for $1 billion. Ridiculous money will just fly into those clubs. But for clubs that don't have that type of ownership and don't have that type of wealth behind it, they're done. Because basically the Newcastles, the Man Cities and anyone else can just throw money in that they've already got, whereas other clubs that don't have that won't. So that's anti-competitive as far as I'm concerned. I don't think this is good for football. In fact, I tweeted it earlier. Man United would have been better off being bought by Qatar. Because if it's going to benefit Newcastle, it's going to benefit Man City, then you'd be better off having a similar ownership model. Because you can just pump your money in and it's the guy with the biggest wallet that wins, or the girl. So if that is what's happened, I don't think this is good for football. It's a win for Man City. And legally, they've found in their favour. But I don't think it's good for football to have clubs that can throw loads and loads of money in and others that can't. I think that's anti-competitive for the Premier League. What we're starting to hear is that it might not be that. What we're starting to hear is that the Premier League are not that bothered, that the overall objectives and framework will still stay in place. So it might not be as a severe thing. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But my overarching thought here is, and I'd love to get your comments, is we're hearing about Man City have won. We're hearing that Man City might sue the Premier League for losses, etc. Is this a power grab? Because fundamentally, I don't know what Man City get out of this. They want to win Premier Leagues in the Premier League. So by defeating the Premier League and then suing the Premier League and making the Premier League look incompetent, you still want to play in the Premier League. Is your end game to destroy the Premier League? Is your end game to boss the Premier League? Is the end game to go into a Super League? Ultimately, I don't think it's good for the game that Man City and the Premier League are at loggerheads like this, because I don't really understand what Man City are doing. If Man City are basically saying, sit down Premier League, we're more powerful than you, well, we don't want that. What we do want is fair regulation. What we do want is an ownership structure at the top of the Premier League and the clubs underneath that. So it's a weird one how this is exactly what I said last week. Things won't be the same. Whatever happens at the end of all of this between the Premier League and Man City, whether it's Man City in trouble or Man City win, football's not going to be the same afterwards, is it? And I sit here going, well, look, it's a moving story. We'll have to wait and see. Literally 10 minutes ago, it looked like Man City had won and everything was going to go in their favour. Literally, an article on the BBC is saying that the Premier League is saying that, that a lot of this is still in their favour. So we'll have to wait and see. But I would say that obviously Man City have scored a win here. How significant that win is, we'll have to wait and find out. How big an impact it has on the 115, we'll have to wait and find out. I get why Man City fans would be happy about it. I guess I'd be happy if I was a Man United fan and it was my club. But in a total let's take a step back way, I don't think this is good for football if rich clubs can inflate their sponsorship deals because they own the companies that they're doing them with to a level that's unrealistic and not fair to get money into their football club through the back door. That is what we're talking about Man City for the last 15 years. This is fundamentally not fair. It's anti-competitive in my opinion. And if Newcastle, a football club that doesn't make a lot of money, starts using Saudi Arabia to inflate sponsorship deals from Saudi Arabia to get money into the club, that's not fair either. And if that's the way football's going to go, then we're going to be living in a different football world, because basically everything we've learnt over the last few decades about clubs and revenue and fairness, etc., will go out the window to a model where if you've got a rich owner, doesn't matter whether 10,000... I mean, look, Bournemouth could dominate world football with an attendance of 10,000 every week if they're owned by Qatar. That's basically what this would mean. It doesn't matter about your fan base. It doesn't matter how big your revenue is historically. If you get bought by a superpower, they will put sponsorships here at ridiculously inflated levels to get money into the club to make them the best team in the world. And it'll have a massive impact on wages. Players will be the winner because everyone will just be like, I want that player, we'll give you $1 million a week, we'll give you 1.5. I don't think that's good for football. I don't think it's good for football, but we'll have to see what happens. And ultimately, it is about the story as it breaks. And if this ends up being worst case scenario, I don't think it's good for football, but we'll have to just get on with it. And if it's not as bad, then we'll have to carry on with the story that is. But it's a moving story. Man City have certainly hit a couple of wins and they've put their statements out as well. But the Premier League are saying overall objectives, framework and decision making of the APT system has been endorsed. It's just two aspects that Man City have won. So let's wait and see. But get your comments in below. Make sure you smash a like on the video and give us your thoughts. Thanks for watching. We will, of course, react when we get more information.
Right, let's get to this, though, because it's really important. Some breaking news. It's just been announced that Manchester City has won their legal challenge against the Premier League's Associated Party Transaction Rules. That's the APT rules. They govern commercial and sponsorship deals with companies connected to their owners. It's totally separate, I might add, to the 115 charges levelled at City by the Premier League that's currently being heard before that independent panel. City deny, of course, all those charges. So the ATP case centres around the fair value of associated party deals. They're designed to make sure that any deals with connected parties are at the market rate and not inflated. Manchester City's argument was that the rules were anti-competitive and broke UK laws. Now, the Premier League say the rule would bring fairness across the division by ending a reliance on enhanced revenues linked to the club's ownership. Now, the hearing was back in June. Both sides had agreed for the verdict to be published. So here is what the Premier League have had to say. The Premier League welcomes the tribunal's findings, which endorse the overall objectives, framework and decision-making of the APT system. The tribunal upheld the need for the APT system as a whole and rejected the majority of Manchester City's challenges. Moreover, the tribunal found that the rules are necessary in order for the league's financial controls to be effective. The decision represents an important and detailed assessment of the APT rules, which ensure clubs are not able to benefit from commercial deals or reductions in costs that are not at fair market value by virtue of relationships with association parties. These rules were introduced to provide a robust mechanism to safeguard the financial stability, integrity and competitive balance of the league. Now, the tribunal did, however, identify a number of discrete elements of the rules which do not, in their current form, comply with competition and public law requirements. These elements, they go on to say, can quickly and effectively be remedied by the league and clubs. In the meantime, the Premier League will continue to operate the existing APT system, taking into account the findings made by the tribunal. As for City, they welcome the
Man City versus Premier League hearing. Latest updates on 115 charges case and when there could be a verdict. The Premier League's case against Manchester City for multiple alleged competition rules breaches finally came before an independent panel in September 2024. English football's top division and the club that has won 6 of the past 7 league titles have been on this collision course since the Premier League issued a weighty charge sheet against City in February 2023. City have repeatedly denied all allegations made against them and claim a comprehensive body of irrefutable evidence exists in support of its position. The case is separate to City's legal challenge against the league's associated party transactions up rules.
Man League hearing. Latest updates, and when a verdict is expected. The hearing into the Premier League's Manchester City case began on Monday, September 16, 2024, at the International Dispute Resolution Centre in London. It is expected to last around 10 weeks. A 3-person panel selected by Murray, Rose and KC will hear evidence presented by lawyers representing City and the Premier League. The panel for such arbitration cases can include any of the 15 members of the Premier League's judicial panel, as well as non-members. The scope and complexity of the case is part of the reason why it has taken so long to reach this stage, whereas the PSA claims against Everton and Forest respectively were fairly straightforward. There is also the element of City's continued alleged non-cooperation with the Premier League, which forms a large chunk of the overall charges. The panel will have a vast array of evidence and testimony to consider before reaching a decision, which is not expected until early 2025. The wait may continue until the spring, but a verdict is anticipated before the end of the 2024-25 season. What are the 115 charges against Man City? At this stage, 115 is a catch-all, online banter staple for all things Manchester City. However, the Premier League's initial error-strewn publication of the charges, which featured sections and subsections of rules books from some seasons that did not apply to others, led to some confusion. One tallying up of the charges, subscribed to by the Times and the Sporting News, is that City are facing 130 alleged breaches. However, for the purposes of staying on brand, we'll go with the breakdown of the 115 charges as per BBC Sport and Sky Sports, which fall into 5 broad categories where Man City cleared by CAS. These areas of alleged wrongdoing will be familiar to anyone who followed UEFA's case against Manchester City. In February 2020, the reigning English champions were banned from continental competitions by European football's governing body for 2 seasons and fined €30 million for not cooperating with the investigation. City appealed their case at the Court of Arbitration for Sport and, in July 2020, they were cleared of disguising equity funding as sponsorship contributions, something that remains the main pillar of the Premier League's case. CAS upheld UEFA's conclusion that City failed to cooperate. The fine was cut from €30 to €10, but Pep Guardiola's February 2023 assertion that his club were found completely innocent was not exactly true. The CAS verdict said that City's failure to comply with the UEFA investigation was a severe breach, and that they should be seriously reproached for obstructing the